Hey guys, it's Holly. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be starting our single parent series that I have recently come up with, and I wanted to make a series out of some videos about being a single parent. So today I'm just essentially going to share a little bit about my personal experience as a single parent. So I feel like ideally with this series, I want this to be my first video just because I feel like it's going to kind of pave the way for the other videos to follow, which there will be at least 2 more, if not 3. So I'm going to go ahead and do this one, and then tomorrow I will probably do another, and then just kind of within the next couple weeks after that, I will be finishing out the series as I am able to. So I will try to make this video as short and as straight to the point as I can. I try not to go on rambling too much, but this is just going to be me sharing my experience. So for me, I haven't talked about this a whole lot on my channel just because I'm so focused on, health tips and wellness and other things, fitness, etc. However, I feel like this is an important thing to address because so many people out there are single parents, and honestly, I think probably more people than not are actually single parents to an extent at this point in society, depending on different circumstances, depending on how you look at it. So at least half, I would say, at least half. And so the first thing I want to point out, I'm going to turn my phone on silent real quick just because I forgot and I don't want any interruptions. So for me, I'm a single mom of 2, and yes, they do have 2 different dads. So I was with both of them. The first one, however, was more short-lived and more, I don't really know how to explain it. It was not an ideal match by any means, especially after the first several weeks. So the good thing about me being a single parent is that I was already established in my career by the time I had my first child, and I had been for a while. So I got pregnant with my first one at 23, and I had him at 24, and at this point I had already been in my career for a good 5 to 6 years, if not closer to 7. So I was already kind of doing well as far as like financially, business wise. I wasn't like rich by any means, but I was doing good, especially for that age, really good for that age, established, and I was renting a house and everything was going pretty smoothly. I was really advancing and branching out, and at this point in time, this was very shortly before I became completely self-employed. It was very shortly before I ended up going into business with a business partner, and so following that, I did become completely self-employed in the latter part of 2015. So I had my first child in 2015, February of 2015. So he's almost 7 now, and I think I definitely had the hardest time with him as opposed to my younger one. I was alone for the majority of my pregnancy. I did not talk to his father for a good portion of that time, and that was very difficult, and unfortunately his father was not very supportive, and he just wasn't, quite frankly, he wasn't convinced that he was the father, and so that was very difficult for me. So I just continued to work and prepare and do everything I possibly could at that point in time, and I did an exceptionally good job looking back. So whenever I went to have my first child, I went through labor and delivery, which it was very difficult for my first one. I was in labor for about 24 hours before they admitted me into the hospital because I was dilating very slowly, which you normally do with your first child. So I was not induced. I chose to go into labor naturally, which I'm glad I did. But I was in excruciating pain for 24 hours before being admitted to the hospital. And then when I was finally admitted and I was given an epidural, I was still in labor for another 12 hours after that. And then when it came time to deliver, I had to push for about 2.5 hours. So after the first couple of hours, my doctor told me that my birth canal was too small and that my baby was not going to come out, and that I could choose between forceps or a C-section. So I chose the forceps, and unfortunately that led to an extremely difficult, extremely painful birth. And I just remember screaming and crying, like it was so horrible. The epidural, I don't know if it wore off, or I don't know if it just wasn't strong enough, but I felt everything the last hour, I would say, of the delivery process. So the forceps did result in a 4th degree tear, which made recovery a little bit more difficult, but I still was able to do a lot, and I still did extremely good considering all the circumstances. So really, from the moment that I was delivering my child, I feel like is the moment that I became truly a single parent. And my mother was in the delivery room at the time, and my best friend at the time was in there as well. And so we actually ended up having to kick my mother out of the delivery room because she was too mentally unstable to handle the delivery process. She was just freaking out. She was making everything worse, and she couldn't handle it. So we just had to kick her out, which was very unfortunate. And she had the ability to help me out at the time, at least a little, at least to an extent. She was working, but she basically just refused to help with anything. And it's not just her, it was just there was nobody else available to help me. And still to this day, I feel so fortunate because I was planning on staying in the hospital completely alone, all by myself. And my business partner's daughter at the time was 15 years old. She is like 21 now, 22. And it was the weekend, it was a Friday afternoon, late afternoon, that I had him. And she asked her mom if she could stay the night with me. And she was like, sure. So she stayed the night with me. So I actually had somebody with me. And she actually stayed with me the whole entire weekend. And then I was able to go home Sunday night. And so I still to this day view her as an angel, because without her, I would have been completely alone in that hospital with my baby, like no help whatsoever. So, yeah, it was just, it was a godsend for me. But when I got home, I was alone. I did have a roommate at the time, but he was very busy taking care of his daughter. He was not able to help. He was working. And so the first night, I just remember a lot of crying. I was crying so hard. I just could not. I was a first-time mom, so I didn't know what to do. And yeah, it was just a mess. So after the first night, actually the very next morning, I ended up just magically getting a handle on everything. Just magically being able to figure out what I needed to do to make the best situation so that we could get some sleep and I could get some sleep, because at this point I had gone at least 48 hours without sleeping a wink at all, and it was just very difficult. So I finally figured out a way to get us to be able to sleep. And for me, unfortunately, well, I'm not going to say unfortunately, for me that was co-sleeping. So, and that's a very controversial topic, so I'm not going to talk about that a whole lot. But I did co-sleep with him, and that was the only way we were able to get rest. I know people have really strong opinions on that. Some people do it, some people don't. Some people love it, some people hate it, but that was what I did. And I'm an extremely light sleeper also, so I felt comfortable doing that. But so moving on from that first initial night and just kind of getting the hang of everything, I took a few weeks off work. Then I went back to work, and I did not really have any childcare at the time, and I didn't really have much of any savings. I was sort of living off my credit cards at the time, which later did catch up with me. But it was really hard. It was a really difficult time, and so I took my son to work with me. So I just took him to work with me, and I would be doing massages, because for those of you that don't know, I'm a licensed massage therapist. So fortunately, I had a business partner, and we were working together, and we were good friends. She was totally fine with me bringing him to work. So as a newborn, I was able to he would just kind of sleep, or he would hang out, while I would do my work. And I was only able to do, 2, 3 max massages per day, but it was enough to get by. It was enough that I was able to make enough money to survive. So fortunately, I was able to do that. And then I guess he was about 4.5 months old, I would say, by the time that he just started getting too active, and I was just no longer able to do that at that point in time. And so fortunately, my son's dad and I were able to find someone reliable for childcare, someone that ran an in-home daycare, and she was okay. She was actually related to my son's older brother, his older brother's grandmother, and so that was really helpful. And so really from that point on, I had a babysitter full time, 4 or 5 days a week, whatever. And since my work hours are a little bit unconventional, and I still don't work as much as an average, 8-hour day or whatever. I would only work anywhere between 4 or 5 hours, to sometimes I would work 6 to 8, just depending on what I had time for. But I would also utilize my childcare time for things like working out at the office in between clients, things like running errands, whatever it is I had to do, meditation. Sometimes I would even take a cat nap if I needed to. So things of that nature, and that was really helpful. And so I'm going to have so many tips whenever I do my next videos. But so that was kind of our newborn stage, and just kind of leading up to by the time he got to be 2, 3, I mean, really not a whole lot changed from that point up until my son was about 3, 3.5, and that was he was almost 4 when I had my second child. So I mean, the main thing that I have struggled with over the years being a single parent, the number one thing that I will say is I've always had a lack of family support. And it's not to be an insult to anybody, it's not to dog anybody, but my parents have helped me to an extent. They do the best that they can. They used to help a little bit more. They have never been the type of grandparents that want to keep the grandchildren just for the heck of it, they just legitimately want to. They've just never been that type of people. They just don't want to. It's just not their thing. And so it's definitely difficult whenever I see other single parents, and they'll be like, oh, yeah, so my mom's gonna keep my kid while, I go on this trip or vacation, and their parents also don't charge them. So my mom does charge me. She's only watched my older son for free one time, back in 2015, one time for a few hours. And that's the only time out of 7 years of being a single parent that I have not had to pay her. Now, I don't have to pay her a whole lot, but I do have to compensate and give her what I can, and that's just the way that she operates. And I'm trying really hard not to be insulting towards anybody in this video, but that's always been a very difficult thing for me, is just seeing other people oh, yeah, I'm going out for a date night, or I'm going out to eat, with so-and-so, and, my parents are going to keep, asked if they could keep the kids, or I'm going to the store, and all of these things, that I have had to face alone, especially back then, because I will say it was harder back then. It's easier now that my oldest son is older, obviously. It does get better the older they get, obviously, but these were all very, very difficult things for me, and things that ultimately led to depression, led me to feel like I was not worthy and not valued as a person. And you have to look at other people and realize people can only do what they can do. They can only see a situation from their own perspective. they can only see things from their own perspective. And so my dad was, he's retired now. He retired about a year to a year and a half ago. And before that point, he was working a lot, so he just really couldn't help me much with the kids. And now he does help more, but I find that now, since he's retired, unfortunately, he's become a lot more lethargic and depressed as well, and he just doesn't always take care of himself, and so he's very, I don't know. I mean, it's really hard to explain, but he does a little bit more than my mom. Which is nice. And I am, don't get me wrong, I'm very thankful for what I do have. I'm very thankful for the help and support that I do have, even though it's never been what I would like it to be. And, that's okay. It has made me a very strong person, but I don't have any siblings, any aunts or uncles, or anybody that can help. My best friend has always been there. She tries her best to help out during emergencies and things of that nature. Unfortunately, she does live about an hour and 10 minutes from me, or at least an hour, so that is a little bit more difficult. However, as far as moral support is concerned, that's been a little bit easier. It's easier to get someone on the phone, a friend to talk to. But I think it's just the simple fact that people do have their own lives, but to this day, I am still pretty hurt by the lack of support from my mother, particularly, but my parents in general, particularly early on in my being a single parent. And I feel like, you can't necessarily expect that people are just going to drop everything and help you, but it does definitely hurt when you have someone like your mother that's able to help you but simply just chooses not to. And so that's been very difficult, and like I say, that is the number one thing that's been hard for me, is the lack of family support. I just don't have anyone else in the family that can help. And so I will elaborate more on that and talk more about kind of how I do things now and how I try to get around that lack of family support to create, support network that is more efficient. So with that being said, by the time I had my second child, which was the latter part of 2018, December, very end of 2018. So my youngest son just turned 3. And so with him, things were a lot easier because I did have my ex-husband. We were on and off for many years, but ultimately he was there. And he was there during, he's there during emergencies, and he also was there during emergencies for my younger son as well. When we started dating, I think my older son was about 16 months old, so he wasn't always there because, like I said, we were on and off. But with my second one, having so much more help in that respect, and also just having his family is a lot more family oriented, a lot more helpful, and so he's able to stay with his cousin and my son's great aunt, and so that helps a lot. And they have some other family members as well that are just happy and willing, to help out with him. And so anyways, but we do give them what we can financially, so that way we feel like, we're not using them or whatever. And not to say that you're using someone if you need someone to help you with your kids and you're not necessarily paying them, but yeah, so that has been really helpful. And there have been times in the past, in which nobody was there, but nowadays most of the time there's somebody there to help with my younger one, almost always, unless there's some kind of emergency or something unusual going on. So that has been a lot better. And I guess the biggest struggle that I've had with my younger one is he kind of has he has sleeping issues and doesn't always sleep as much as most kids his age. And so he started having sleeping problems when he was a baby, probably around 5 or 6 months old is when we started noticing it. And at that point in time, that was very, very difficult. And so at that point in time, my ex-husband and I, we were not living together, and I was keeping both the kids. And so my older son, he goes with his dad. He was going with his dad a few nights a week, 2 or 3 nights a week at the time. So that was helpful. And so yeah, I'll get into that later. But so long story short, what happened was my youngest son was not sleeping very well, and so that went on for at least 3 or 4 months. It was a very difficult phase, but during that time, my ex-husband was willing to keep him. I think it was about one night a week that we were doing, so I was able to get that one night a week of some pretty good sleep, so that was helpful, and that really is the only thing that I think made me survive that point in time. So, we just did what we could, and at the end of the day, that's all you can do, is just do the best that you can. And so that sleep deprivation period was very, very rough. And I mean, I'm not just talking losing a couple of hours, and I'm talking like I would run off, 2 hours of sleep, 1 hour of sleep, 3 hours of sleep, just day after day, because it was that hard. And on top of that, having to take care of everything else, like the housework, trying to take care of myself by getting a workout in, taking care of my older son, all of these things. And so that really is the biggest struggle. I would say to this day, my youngest son does still struggle with the sleeping. It has gotten better, but he still does have issues periodically. Occasionally he'll stay up like the whole entire night. And so anyways, I did get divorced last year, and my ex-husband and I decided to just do like a 50-50. So I have our son half the time, and he has him half the time. So that's essentially what we do, and it seems to work out really well for us. And he was not willing to really do anything, give me any more time than that. And I didn't want to fight over it, because there was already a whole lot of fighting that had been done, a whole lot of disagreeing, and really honestly just a lot of going to court and very traumatic situations that I still have PTSD from to this day. So we went ahead and just agreed on the 50-50. I did not want any more trauma anymore. It was affecting my older son as well, so I did not want any more to do with that. So that is just what we did, and that's just the way it is. So that does help a lot, because half the time I'm able to sleep a little bit better and get some more things done, try to maintain work to the best of my ability. So my oldest son's dad started keeping him 2 to 3 nights a week when he was a year and a half old. And actually it was probably before that. It's probably about a year old, but anyways, so that helped me a lot, being a single parent, like just having his help. So every single person is going to be different. Every mom and dad, everybody's going to be different. Everyone's going to have a different level of what they're willing to give and put in at the end of the day. And so that was all I had, but that was very helpful. And yeah, so I think one of the other huge problems that has been very difficult as a single parent for me, and kind of unique to my circumstance, is that my oldest son, who's almost 7 now, he's had issues with asthma and frequent illness since he was very young. So when he was about 6 months old, he was diagnosed with asthma, and he got sick for the first time and had bronchiolitis. So from that point on, really, he started getting sick very frequently. He was literally sick every 2 to 3 weeks. I'm not even kidding. For 2.5 years on average. If I had to average that, I'd say about 2.5 years that went on. So really, he was about 3, well over 3, before he stopped getting sick just constantly. He might have even been 3.5. So, and that's one reason why we do homeschool. So, if you ever want to watch any of my other homeschool videos, but that's always been really difficult as well. And so, unfortunately, he does still have asthma. He has not outgrown it yet. I am hoping that he will. I don't know for certain that he will, but I do have faith. And that's, oh my gosh, as a single parent, the sicknesses are really the hardest thing, in my opinion, the hardest thing that you can deal with and go through as a single parent. So, everything else aside, I think so many people focus on, oh, being a single parent is so hard financially. It's so hard, in the respect of money. But from my personal experience, it's actually been a lot harder on a physical level as opposed to a financial level. Physical level as far as sleep deprivation, as far as your body just being worn out, not being able to keep up with things always physically, and so, lack of sleep and all these other things. So I cannot count how many times we were at urgent care, the emergency room. He had RSV. He had, if he would get sick with a cold or a respiratory infection, anything of that nature, sometimes he would have an asthma flare up that would go on for weeks. And with him, he doesn't so much have trouble breathing. It's more of like an overproduction of mucus. And so what happens is just this mucusy cough, and having to go back to the doctor again the next day and the next day. He went through a period of time where he was getting strep throat nonstop. Just all of these things. When he was 4, he had a very rare staph infection known as scalded skin syndrome, which is a rare staph infection that affects children under the age of 6. And so he was hospitalized for 4 days. That was very difficult. And I was also breastfeeding at the time my younger son. So I was having to like pump milk, and it was mostly just me with him there the majority of the time. And I didn't have anyone else that could really just stay there with me. And so that honestly kind of reminded me of like my labor and delivery experience and bringing him home, because it was just so lonely. And I would have to pick him up and carry him to the bathroom because he couldn't carry himself, and I was losing a lot of sleep as well. I was having to wake up sometimes every hour to carry him to the bathroom, and it was very, very difficult. And just other times of waiting up all night at the emergency room for whatever reason, but just a lot of illnesses, literally, like I said before, every 2 to 3 weeks for a good 2.5 years. And that was just the way it was. I know it sounds like a lot, but that was just what we went through. However, I know it could be a lot worse, and I am very thankful that I don't have, children with, true disabilities, because I can only imagine how difficult it is for single parents that have children with disabilities, physical, or, otherwise. So, yeah. So my older son also does have a pretty intense case of ADHD, which we do our best to work with. And there are some other things in there as well, but fortunately my younger son has always been a really easy child. He's always been great, aside from the sleeping issues, I will say that. He does still have some tantrums here and there because he's 3, but he's a good kid. He's so sweet. He is just a beautiful soul overall, and so I'm so thankful for that. But yes, it has been difficult overall. Those are kind of just like my main points of my experience, and that's about all I'm gonna get into. I know there's stuff I'm sure I'm leaving out, but I am I'm almost like 29 minutes into this video. So yeah, so I'm looking at my paper right now so I can make sure that I kind of got everything that I wanted to talk about. So, but yeah, there's just a lot of sacrifice. I mean, but that comes with having children in general. And the thing is, whether you're a single parent or not, some of these things you may still experience, especially if you don't have a lot of family support. Even if you have a loyally devoted partner, you may still experience some of these issues to an extent if you are lacking in the support system department. So anyways, again, I didn't mean to offend anyone with this video, Not that anyone I talked about is going to be seeing this video anyway, because they probably will not. But I just want to put that out there. But I did want to share my experience because that kind of helps with the other videos that I'm going to be doing. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed my first video of our single parent series. Again, this was my personal experience thus far leading up to this point. I will also point out that the COVID pandemic certainly did not make this any easier. So anyways, but I look forward to the other videos I'm going to do, and I hope this helps somebody out there, and I will see you in our next video.